Why did the desert feel so quiet, too quiet? Lieutenant Logan Barnes asked himself the question again, though he already knew the answer. Quiet in Iraq never meant safety. Quiet meant someone was watching. The sun pressed down like a hammer over the desert, turning the Humvee's metal frame into an oven. Dust caked the windshield, sweat streaked down his back, but it wasn't the heat gnawing at him. It was the silence. The radio had been nothing but static for 20 minutes, and each minute stretched thinner than the last. "Calm still down, sir." Miller, his comms man, said it flat, like he was reading off a weather report. But Barnes could hear it, the stiffness in his voice, the fear pressed flat into discipline. Miller knew as well as Barnes did. When the desert went silent, it was about to scream. Barnes checked his watch. 15:47 hours. Their target convoy should have come by half an hour ago. Intel had said a high-value Al-Qaeda lieutenant was moving through with minimal security. Easy interception, they'd called it. A clean grab. But now it felt like they'd driven straight into a coffin and nailed the lid shut. "How much longer do we give it?" Barnes asked, glancing into the Chief Petty Officer Mike sat there, stone-faced as ever. The man was a living statue of combat experience, and when his eyes narrowed, Barnes' gut clenched. "Something's off, LT. We should have seen movement by now." The words had barely left his mouth when the world exploded. A blast ripped across the horizon. The scream of an RPG cut through the air. A second later, the Humvee behind them erupted in flame. The shockwave slammed into Barnes' vehicle, throwing him forward as black smoke bellowed upward. Ambush, 9 o'clock. James was already spinning the mounted .50 cal toward the tracers lit the sand. Muzzle flashes peppered the high ground. Barnes' training snapped into place. He shouted orders, voice raw, chest burning with the weight of command. "Miller, behind that berm, lay down suppressive fire. I'll check the second Humvee." The air turned into a storm of lead. Sand burst around him as he sprinted low toward the burning wreck. Through the smoke he saw David dragging someone by the vest. Lieutenant Williams. Another body lay limp in the sand. He wasn't moving. "Williams is hit bad," shouted. Blood soaked through the lieutenant's uniform. "Didn't make it." Another round chewed dirt inches from Barnes' boots. He grabbed Williams's vest, helped drag him behind what remained of the wreck. Williams's breaths were shallow, ragged, his eyes fluttered, fighting to stay conscious. "Get him to cover," Barnes barked. His own hands shook as he tore through the wreckage for the med kit. The firefight swelled. Not 5, not 10, at least 20 insurgents were pouring over the, advancing with precision, not panic. This wasn't some ragtag ambush. These men moved like soldiers. "Falcon Base, this is Viper 6, Barnes yelled into his comms, voice breaking through the chaos. "We are under heavy fire 5 clicks south of Checkpoint Delta. 1 KIA, 1 critical. Request immediate air support, over." "Static." "Only static." Slid into cover beside him, sweat streaking through the dust on his face. "Radios are jammed. They're cutting us off. Whoever set this up knows exactly what they're doing." Barnes' stomach sank. 40 minutes away was the nearest QRF. They wouldn't last 10. Williams was fatting fast. Ammunition was draining in seconds. And this was his first combat command. His first. And already men were dying under his watch. 20 minutes, maybe less, muttered grimly, scanning the. Barnes could feel the edges closing in. His men trapped, surrounded, and then. One shot cracked through the desert. Not the rattle of AK fire, not the chatter of rifles. A single, sharp report. And one of the insurgents dropped, clean. A headshot, surgical and final. Before anyone could react, another shot. Another man fell, then a third. The ridge that had been fire and death moments earlier froze. Confusion rippled through the fighters. Shouts, movement, fear. Whoever had just joined this fight, they weren't missing. Barnes' radio, the one dead with static, suddenly hissed to life. Not on his frequency, not military chatter, A voice calm, female, steady. Viper 6, adjust your position 3 meters north. You've got hostiles flanking your 3 o'clock. I count 15 tangos, 6 already neutralized. Confirm. Barnes' eyes locked ons. The chief's expression finally cracked, a flicker of shock. "Who is this?" Barnes demanded. His voice shook with adrenaline. "Identify yourself." "Call sign Whisper. I have overwatch from the eastern ridge. You're in a kill box. On my mark, suppress to your front and fall back 30 meters to the wash behind you. Better cover there." Another shot cracked. Another fighter collapsed mid-stride. Barnes' instincts screamed not to trust voices out of the ether, but this one was already keeping them alive. "Copy that, Whisper," he breathed. His throat felt dry. "Ready on your mark." 3, 2, 1, mark. The team opened fire as one, their weapons roaring in unison. Suppression bought them a heartbeat, just enough. They hauled Williams back, boots slipping in sand, diving into the shallow riverbed. Cover. For the first time in 20 minutes, real cover. "Better," Whisper's voice came again, calm as stone. 3 hostiles moving north ridge. I'll handle them. Focus west." The team braced, scanning sectors, hearts pounding. And like a ghost answering her promise, 3 rapid shots rang out. 3 bodies dropped on the ridge. Whisper's voice returned, unshaken. Clear. For 18 minutes, the longest 18 minutes of Barnes' life, they fought side by side with someone they couldn't see. Her voice cut through the chaos like a scalpel. 2, moving flank east, suppressed. Truck incoming from the horizon, I have the driver. Breach in their formation, push now. Every shot she fired was a story of finality. Every saved seconds. Seconds meant lives. Barnes found himself moving not against death but with it, carried by a stranger's hand steadying his own. Then the truck, a flatbed roaring toward them with reinforcements. Before the SEALs could even adjust, 3 cracks split the air. The driver slumped. The cab swerved. 2 passengers inside dropped in the same heartbeat. The truck careened sideways, rolled, blocked the narrow road. The insurgents broke, retreating, scattering. Whisper's calm voice. "Last 4 tangos moving northeast, calling for backup. But it won't arrive before your extraction. Air support inbound, ETA 7 minutes. As if her words conjured it, Barnes' regular comms finally crackled to life. "Viper 6, this is Falcon base, QRF inbound, ETA 9 minutes. Hold your position." Barnes pressed the transmitter. "Copy, Falcon, we're holding." But his other hand clutched the secure channel. "Who are you?" he asked into the static. "How did you find us?" Silence. For a breath he thought she was gone. Then, "Someone who reads the wind. Ghost Ridge sends regards." The channel died. Later, when the QRF touched down, the ridge was empty. No trace. No footprints. Nothing but spent brass. One casing slipped into his pocket as if placed there by unseen hands. Scratched into its base were 4 letters. GRDG. Ghost Ridge. Barnes stared at it as the dust from the medevac's rotors swirled around him. His men bleeding, his chest hollow with the weight of death, but his mind burned with only one question. Who was she? And why had she chosen to save them? Why was the silence inside Falcon's command center louder than the battlefield had been? Lieutenant Logan Barnes stood stiff in the corridor, dust still caked on his uniform, blood still drying under his nails. Around him, the outpost hummed with movement, rotors thumped, boots struck gravel, radios hissed, but none of it seemed to reach him. His ears still rang with the echoes of gunfire. His chest still carried the weight of a man's last breath. "Lieutenant Barnes." The young specialist at the door barely met his eyes. "Colonel Garrison will see you now, sir." Barnes swallowed hard. He wasn't ready to explain what had just happened. He wasn't ready to say his name out loud in the past tense, but orders were orders. The command center was cool, fluorescent, a stark contrast to the desert heat outside. Maps plastered the walls. Screens blinked with operational updates. And behind a desk stacked with folders and a well-worn field manual sat Colonel William Iron Bill Garrison. At 68, he should have been retired. Everyone said so. But his silver hair, clipped tight, framed eyes that had seen more wars than Barnes could count. Vietnam, Desert Storm, and now this. His presence carried weight, not rank alone, but something heavier. "Lieutenant," Garrison's voice was gravel and steel. He gestured to the chair. "Sit." Barnes obeyed, back rigid. "I've read the preliminary report," Garrison began, his tone even. "Nasty business out there. How, Williams?" "Critical but stable, sir. Medevac got him to surgery in time." Garrison nodded slowly, and the question cracked something in Barnes' chest. He forced the word out. "KIA, sir." Silence. Garrison's expression didn't change, but the weight of his gaze pressed down like a stone. "First time losing a man under your command." "Yes, sir." "They all are," Garrison said, voice low, "and each time feels like the first." His eyes softened for just a fraction. "You did what you could. Tell me what happened, the version." Barnes exhaled shakily. Then he told it all, the silence, the RPG's death, the jamming, the hopelessness, and then the impossible, a female voice on a ghost channel. Shots that landed with surgical precision from a distance no ordinary sniper could manage. A presence unseen, yet utterly decisive. "She called herself Whisper," Barnes finished. His voice lowered, unsure whether he even believed his own words. "She saved us. 11 confirmed hostiles neutralized, anticipated enemy maneuvers, coordinated our fallback, and somehow knew about our air support before comms were restored." He reached into his pocket and placed the cartridge casing on the desk. Its brass surface was scratched with 4 crude letters, GRDG. Chief found it in his gear afterward. No idea how it got there. Garrison picked up the casing, turning it between his fingers. His expression betrayed nothing, but Barnes noticed it, the faint tightening in his jaw. Recognition. "Sir, do you know what Ghost Ridge means?" For a moment, Garrison didn't answer. His eyes stayed fixed on the casing, thumb tracing its rough engraving. Finally, he set it down with deliberate care. "It's not in any official record, Lieutenant. Certainly nothing you need to concern yourself with." "With respect, sir," Barnes pressed, leaning forward. "Whoever Whisper is, she saved my men. She knew our call signs. She had access to secure frequencies. She had intelligence better than ours. If she's operating in our AO, shouldn't we be aware of it?" The old colonel studied him for a long, unblinking moment. Then, without a word, he stood. "Walk with me." They left the command center and crossed toward the perimeter fence. The setting sun bled gold across the desert, shadows stretching long and thin. Only when they were well clear of other ears did Garrison finally speak. "What I'm about to tell you doesn't exist, Lieutenant. No records, no acknowledgement. If asked, this conversation never happened." Barnes nodded, throat dry. "Ghost Ridge isn't a what, it's a who." Garrison's voice was measured but heavy. "And this isn't the first time she's appeared when conventional forces were about to be erased." He paused, eyes drifting out toward the endless horizon. "I've seen her before. Desert Storm 91. My unit was pinned down near the Kuwait border. Outnumbered, cut off, no extraction. We were done. Then precision fire. Republican Guard officers dropping one by one. A voice on a channel we shouldn't have been able to access guiding us out. Calm, female, unshakable." Barnes stared. "You're saying it's the same person?" 12 years ago, Lieutenant. Same call sign, same calling card." Garrison lifted the casing again. "Same ghost." "But that's impossible." Garrison gave a half shrug. "That's what the brass said. They wrote it off as combat stress. Hallucinations. A guardian angel story, but I knew what I heard. And I know this, she's not a hallucination." Barnes struggled to find words. "Then who is she?" "That's where it gets complicated." Garrison's voice dropped lower, almost a whisper of its own. "Have you ever heard of the Phantom Protocol?" Barnes shook his head. "Good," Garrison said, "because officially it doesn't exist." He stepped closer to the fence, gaze locked on the horizon as if the desert itself might be listening. During the Cold War, certain assets were developed. Operators who worked completely off the books. No records, no oversight, not even a chain of command. People too skilled, too unorthodox, or too inconvenient to fit the system. They were ghosts, deployed only when the system failed. "Black Ops?" Barnes asked carefully. "Blacker than black. These weren't missions hidden by classification. These were people who didn't exist. No service jackets, no medals, just shadows. I helped build it." The words struck Barnes like a physical blow. He stared at the older man, searching his face. But Garrison wasn't bluffing. His eyes were steady, carrying the burden of secrets too heavy for paper. "Whisper," Barnes whispered back, tasting the name differently now. "You're saying she's one of these phantoms." "I don't just believe it," Garrison said, voice firm. "I know it. And the question you should be asking is not who she is. It's why she came for you." Before Barnes could respond, he felt something heavy in his pocket, something that hadn't been there before. He reached inside. Fingers brushed folded paper. He unfolded it under the fading light. Coordinates, a time 200. Garrison looked down at it, expression grim. "Looks like you've got an invitation, Lieutenant." Barnes' pulse quickened. "Why me?" The colonel finally turned, his weathered face breaking into something between a smile and a warning. "Because sometimes, son, the system fails those it's supposed to protect. And when that happens, the ghosts decide who they trust." The sun dipped below the horizon. Shadows deepened across the wire, and Barnes realized the ambush hadn't been the end of something. It had been the beginning. How could the stars look so calm when the world below was tearing itself apart? February 1991. The Kuwaiti border. A sky black as ink stretched over the desert, every star sharp against the void. Captain Madison lay prone on a rocky ridge, cheek pressed against the stock of her rifle. Her breath moved slow, measured, almost unnatural in its control. Through her scope, the desert was green-lit shadow and threat. "Pilot's beacon, been active 6 hours," whispered the voice beside her. Colonel William Garrison, then a major, his weathered face lit faintly by night vision. "Iraqi patrols already swept sectors 1 and 3. "They'll find him soon," Madison replied, her voice low, even. She didn't move her eye from the scope. The man they were hunting wasn't an enemy. He was one of their own. Lieutenant Thomas Cooper, F-16 pilot, had ejected after his jet took a missile. His emergency radio had chirped faintly across the net. He was alive for now. Command had decided he wasn't worth the risk. Too deep, too dangerous. A write-off. "Command's response?" she asked, though she already knew. Garrison's jaw tightened. "High risk, limited strategic value, they've scrubbed it." Madison finally looked up. Her green eyes glowed faintly in the starlight. "So officially, we're not here." "Unofficially," Garrison said, a ghost of a smile on his lips, "we don't leave our people behind, not even when the brass does." For most of the Army, Madison didn't exist. On paper, she was a logistics officer, but her reality was different. Years of secret training, shooting ranges no one admitted existed, mentorship under men who'd never acknowledge her in public. A woman sniper in a war where women weren't even allowed to fight. She was the kind of soldier the system buried, unless someone like Garrison pulled her into the light. Movement, her breath stilled. Sector 4, 3-man patrol, moving toward the beacon. Through her scope, she counted them. Iraqi soldiers sweeping methodically, not just conscripts, disciplined, alert, the kind who would find Cooper before dawn. 920 meters, she whispered. Wind 6 knots east. Garrison glanced at his watch. "Your shot." Her finger rested against the trigger. Calm, steady, she exhaled. The world narrowed to the crosshairs, a heartbeat, a squeeze. Crack. The lead soldier folded instantly, sound swallowed by the desert. Before the others reacted, she cycled the bolt, acquired, fired again. One more body hit the dirt. Third shot. Perfect. The desert swallowed 3 lives in less than 10 seconds. Vehicle team moving, Garrison said, already lifting his rifle. His shots rang out, 2 more Iraqis dropping near their truck. But Madison was already moving. She didn't celebrate, didn't speak. Just packed her rifle, eyes always scanning. They'll call backup, we need to move. The desert was not kind. Every rock threatened noise. Every shadow threatened to betray them. Yet Madison moved like the ground itself trusted her. Silent, relentless. They reached the riverbed where the beacon pulsed weakly. 2 more soldiers crouched near the rocks. Too close for a clean sniper shot. Too fast for a second plan. Too risky, Garrison murmured. We wait. There isn't time. Madison's jaw tightened. Dawn was bleeding toward the horizon. Soon the desert would be light and Cooper would be dead. Before he could argue, she was gone, a shadow peeling into darkness. The first soldier never saw her. A hand clamped, a strike silence. The second turned at the sound, but she was already on him, a knife flashing once. When Garrison joined her, both men were on the ground. Unnecessarily hazardous, he muttered. Effective, she answered simply, wiping the blade clean. They found Cooper hidden in a shallow cave, leg mangled from the ejection, lips cracked from thirst. His eyes widened at the sight of her, a woman in combat gear, but shock turned to relief. Thought no one was coming, he croaked. Officially, no one did, Garrison said, already checking his wounds. Unofficially, you're lucky. They started moving, half carrying the pilot, every step a countdown to sunrise. That was when the sound came. Heavy engines, armored vehicles, patrol. BTRs, Madison whispered, eyes narrowing. 2 at least. Cooper groaned. Go, leave me, I'll hold them off. Not happening, Garrison said. Options. She scanned the terrain, calculating. Ridge 2 clicks north, defensible, overwatch. If they moved fast, she could thin the enemy before they reached them. It was desperate, but desperate was all they had. They made it barely. Garrison set Cooper against the rocks, rifle ready. Madison dropped prone, unpacked her rifle, set her scope. 8 dismounts, 750 meters, 2 on vehicles. Make them count, Garrison said simply. Her world narrowed, breath, crosshairs, heartbeat. 8 shots. 8 kills. Each one impossible, varying distances, shifting wind, moving targets. And yet one by one they fell. The desert swallowed their lives as silently as it had the patrol before. Survivors panicked. Vehicles turned. The patrol fled. When the helicopter finally came, lifting Cooper into the night sky, Garrison looked at her differently. Not as someone out of place. Not as a soldier who shouldn't be there, but as something else entirely. Some people need the spotlight, she said over the roar of rotors. Her voice was steady, calm, but her eyes betrayed something deeper. Others, we operate better in the dark. He nodded once, he understood. Word spread, of course. Not officially, never officially, but in hushed tones. A woman sniper who appeared from nowhere, 8 impossible shots. Soldiers saved who should have been lost. A guardian angel, a ghost. Weeks later, a casing appeared in her quarters. Spent brass, scratched with 2 words. Ghost Ridge. She never told anyone she kept it. Because it wasn't a medal, it wasn't recognition, it was something heavier, a reminder. That was the beginning of the legend. A name whispered in barracks, carried across battlefields. A ghost who came when all hope was gone. And it was only the beginning of Madison's descent into shadows. Why did the Pentagon's polished halls feel colder than the desert? 3 months after Desert Storm ended, Major William Garrison sat at the end of a long table. His uniform was crisp, his posture sharp, but he knew the men staring back at him weren't here for uniforms or posture. Generals, colonels, men carved from the bedrock of American tradition. and what he was about to propose would rattle that bedrock. He began, his voice steady. The nature of war is changing. We remain the strongest force in the world. But the last conflict revealed gaps that conventional structures cannot close. A general frowned. You're proposing a new Black Ops unit, Major. We already have them. No, sir, Garrison replied. His words came slow, deliberate. Not a unit, a protocol, a way of deploying individuals who don't fit the system, but whose skills save lives when nothing else can. He slid folders across the table. Inside, accounts of moments that never officially happened. A pilot saved in Kuwait. A sniper's impossible shots. Men rescued from hopeless ambushes. Stories whispered but never written. These were resolved by operators who officially weren't there, Garrison said. Ghost stories, another general muttered. Combat stress. Soldiers see angels when they're scared. Then I ask you this, Garrison shot back. If they're angels, why do the bodies still drop where the crosshairs settle? Silence stretched across the room. Finally, one Colonel Henderson, a Marine with chestfuls of ribbons, leaned forward. You're talking about Captain Madison, the woman sniper, the one who shouldn't even have been there. Garrison met his gaze evenly. Yes, the one who wasn't supposed to exist, and yet she did what no one else could. Another general's voice was sharp. The combat exclusion policy exists for a reason. Women aren't meant to be in the line. It threatens cohesion. With respect, sir, Garrison said, his tone iron, policy doesn't save lives. Skill does. And when a policy keeps the best shooter in theater from pulling the trigger, that's not cohesion. That's cowardice. The room stiffened, but none of them argued the point. Phantom protocol, Garrison continued. Not a unit, ghosts, no records, no oversight, deployed only when everything else fails. Soldiers who exist for those who need them and vanish before the bureaucracy can catch up. For hours they argued, budgets, risks, accountability, but at the end, when the brass filed out, one general lingered, special operations. He studied Garrison for a long moment. This Madison, is she that good? Better, Garrison said simply. That was how it began. A name scribbled on no order sheet. A budget hidden inside other budgets. A handful of operatives pulled from corners of the system, too unorthodox, too inconvenient, too exceptional. And at the center, Madison. For her, Phantom Protocol wasn't a promotion. It was liberation. No more fighting policies that told her she didn't belong. No more hiding in the background while men less skilled took the shots. In the shadows, skill was all that mattered. But shadows demanded more. That was when she met him, Carlos, the white feather, the Marine sniper whose 93 confirmed kills in Vietnam had rewritten the rules of long-range war. Officially, he was retired. Unofficially, he was here waiting for her. Shooting, just physics and patience, he told her on the first day. His voice was worn but sharp. Master those and nothing else matters, but if you want to go further, you'll have to listen to things no book will teach you. Under, she became more than good. She became impossible. Hours of stillness until her pulse slowed enough to merge with the earth. Days of waiting without food, body unmoving, eyes locked on a scope. Ballistics in her head, wind as language, distance as instinct. Her breakthrough came in the Colorado mountains, training exercise. Range 1,500 meters, wind gusting cross-shifting, light fatting. She lay prone, the cold biting her bones, the target a dot nearly invisible. The other trainees shook their heads, too far, too unstable, a waste of a round. She breathed, listened, waited, then squeezed. The round struck dead center, then another, and another, 5 shots, each one where no shot should have gone. Lowered his binoculars. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, you're not just reading the wind. You're listening to it change before it knows it will. I've never seen anyone do that. Only shrugged. The wind talks, you just have to listen long enough. From then on, she wasn't just a sniper. She was Whisper, a name born not from volume but from presence. Her bullets arrived like whispers in the dark. Her movements left no trace. Her existence was, yet her legend grew. And legends don't rest easy. Over the years, Phantom Protocol never grew large, never more than 7 operatives, each one unique, each one invisible. They saved lives, prevented disasters, stopped wars before they started, and every time they vanished, leaving nothing but rumor. But for Whisper, the weight grew. Each kill confirmed not by medals but by silence. Each mission ending not with recognition but with a casing scratched with a word: Ghost Ridge. The men she saved remembered, but the system never would. One night years later, Garrison asked her quietly, "Do you ever regret it, living this way?" Her eyes stayed on the horizon. "Some people need the spotlight, others need the shadows. I've always preferred the latter." Her voice was calm, but somewhere behind it lived the truth. Shadows are heavy, and even whispers carry weight. Why did he go? That was the question burning in Barnes' mind as the Humvee rattled out of Falcon's gates and into the desert night. The coordinates weighed heavy in his pocket. The ink had smeared slightly from his sweat, but the numbers were etched into his brain. 331742 N, 4346, 19, E, a dried-out wadi, 2 clicks south of the Euphrates. 200 hours. He could have reported it, could have handed it over to Garrison, but something in the colonel's eyes told him this was personal. This wasn't the kind of thing you submitted as intel. This was an invitation. Sat beside him, quiet as always, drove, eyes fixed on the horizon. Miller muttered under his breath about frequencies and ghosts, his radio cradled like a lifeline. None of them asked why they were out here. None of them questioned the risk. They followed Barnes into hell already. What was one more trip? The desert stretched endless, the moon a pale coin casting faint silver over the sand. At 1:55 they cut the engine. The silence was deafening. Barnes checked his watch, 5 minutes. Then a voice, calm female, close this time. "You're early." The seals spun, weapons raised, and there she was. She seemed to rise out of the sand itself. Dark fatigues blending with shadow, rifle slung across her chest with casual authority. Her face was half covered by but her eyes, those eyes stopped Barnes cold. Green, sharp and steady. Not the eyes of a ghost. The eyes of someone who had carried weight far too long and refused to bend under it. "Drop it," barked, aiming down his sight. She didn't flinch. "If I wanted you dead, Chief, you'd already be dead." Her tone wasn't arrogance, it was fact. Barnes stepped forward, lowering his weapon slowly. "Whisper." She tilted her head slightly. "Some call me that." Muttered under his breath, "Holy shit." Up close she was nothing like the legend. She wasn't glowing, she wasn't spectral. She was lean, hardened, maybe late 30s, streaks of gray at her temples. Scars traced along her jaw where they slipped. Human, very human. But her presence filled the desert. "You saved us," Barnes said. The words felt inadequate. "Back there at the ambush." Her eyes lingered on him, unreadable. "I didn't save you, I preserved options." The team exchanged uneasy glances. "Why us?" Barnes asked. "Why me?" Whisper adjusted her rifle, gaze flicking toward the horizon. "Because you weren't supposed to walk away from that ambush. Someone sold you out. I don't like seeing pawns left to burn." The words hung heavy. "Someone sold you out." "Intel came from CIA," Miller muttered, his face pale. "Jesus." "Names don't matter," Whisper cut in. "What matters is this: they'll try again. Next time, without me watching, you won't survive." Barnes' fists clenched. The thought of his body in the dirt still clawed at his chest. "So what? You want us to hide under your cloak, be your charity case?" For the first time her eyes flashed with something sharp. Not anger, pain. "I don't do charity, I do survival. You want to live? Follow me. You want to die clean in your uniform? Stay here." The desert wind whipped around them. carrying the silence like judgment. Finally lowered his weapon. If she's offering a way through this, we'd be idiots to ignore it. Barnes exhaled, then nodded once. All right, we're listening. She didn't smile, didn't soften. She just turned, moving into the wadi like a shadow leading them deeper into the dark. They followed. Inside, the ground dipped into a shallow cave, hidden from above. Lantern light flickered against stone. Maps littered a small folding table. Ammunition boxes stacked neatly in the corner. A sniper's nest carved into the earth itself. "This is where you live?" asked quietly. Whisper didn't answer. Instead, she spread the maps across the table. Convoy, 3 nights from now, moving weapons through, heavily guarded, but one of those trucks isn't carrying weapons, it's carrying proof. Proof of what? Barnes asked. She met his eyes. Proof of who sold you out. The room fell silent. You'll have one chance, Whisper continued. Intercept the convoy, extract the case, get out before air support locks down the route. Do it clean, or the system buries you before you even understand what you stumbled into. Barnes studied her face. There was no bravado, no agenda, just cold, calculated survival. Why help us? He asked again, quieter this time. She looked away. Because once, someone pulled me out when the system decided I wasn't worth saving. Maybe I owe the debt forward. The words lingered, heavy with something unspoken. Garrison. Barnes felt the weight shift inside him. For the first time since the ambush, a spark of clarity cut through the fog. They weren't soldiers following orders anymore. They were shadows chasing truth. He leaned over the map, tracing the convoy's route with his finger. Then let's plan. And in that hidden cave under the desert stars, the seals and the ghost who wasn't supposed to exist began to weave an alliance, fragile, uneasy, but bound by necessity. None of them knew that in 3 nights, the desert would bleed again. Why did the night always feel sharpest, just before it broke into dawn? Barnes crouched low against the ridge, the desert air thin and brittle in his lungs. Below, a dirt road snaked west, nothing more than a pale scar through endless sand. Somewhere beyond the horizon, engines rumbled faintly. The convoy was coming. Lay prone beside the M240, scanning his sector. Miller adjusted his comms, though they were already on Whisper's secure net. Checked the charges, hands methodical even under the weight of what they were about to do. And then there was her. Whisper Madison. She moved along the ridge with quiet assurance, spotting scope slung over her shoulder, rifle already broken down into its parts until the moment it was needed. Her presence was steadying and unsettling all at once. She wasn't in command, not officially, but every man felt the shift. Her calm was heavier than any order Barnes had ever barked. Convoy ETA 6 minutes, she murmured, eyes scanning the horizon. 6 vehicles. Lead is a with heavy machine gun, 2 troop carriers, 1 armored truck, that's your prize, the rest, noise. Her words cut like scalpel strokes, precise, unemotional. Barnes' chest tightened. You've done this before. She glanced at him once, a flicker of something, not pride, not ego, but memory. More times than I count, more times than I wanted. The engines grew louder. Dust plumes marked the horizon. Headlights flickered in the dark, small suns rising where none should exist. Barnes whispered into the net, "Positions, wait for my mark." The convoy rolled closer. Whisper lay prone now, rifle assembled, cheek pressed to the stock, her breathing steady as stone. Through her scope, the world slowed. 600 meters, she murmured, voice low, meant only for herself. Crosswind 3 knots, driver lead truck, adjust 1 point left. Barnes didn't know whether she was talking to them or to herself, but when her finger squeezed, the lead driver's head snapped back in an instant. The swerved, tires screaming, flipping into the ditch. Chaos erupted, shouts, brakes, soldiers spilling from trucks, and in that heartbeat of disorder, Whisper's voice cut clean. Now. Barnes gave the order and the ridge lit up. 240 thundered. Charges boomed as the rear truck exploded, trapping the convoy between fire and stone. The SEALs poured fire downrange, disciplined bursts shredding through the chaos. Whisper was different. While the others fired suppressive, she was surgical. Each shot one man down, another. She moved through targets as if time bent for her. Barnes found himself watching her between his own bursts, disbelief clawing at his chest. She wasn't aiming. She was listening, reading, becoming part of the wind itself. And yet there was nothing superhuman about her. Her lips trembled slightly with each breath. Her eyes narrowed, hard lines carved deep by years of waiting too long in the dark. She wasn't a ghost. She was a woman carrying scars heavier than steel. Barnes, her voice snapped him back. Truck 3, passenger side, RPG prepping. He swung his sight just in time to see the fighter lift the launcher, then drop, Whisper's bullet already tearing through him. For 38 minutes the battle stretched. Each second bled into the next. Bullets hissed, sand leapt, blood pooled dark under moonlight, and slowly, methodically, the convoy broke. Survivors fled into the night, leaving their prize behind. The armored truck. Barnes signaled the push. They swept down the ridge, weapons raised, covering arcs sharp, blew the rear hatch. Smoke hissed. Miller pulled the crate free, heavy, sealed, stenciled with CIA markings. His voice cracked. "Sir, this is American." The team froze, even Whisper. Barnes' throat felt like glass. Proof, just as she'd said, proof they'd been fed to the wolves by their own. Kicked the dirt, rage etched in every movement. "We've been running Black Ops errands for Langley without knowing it. Died for this." His eyes stayed cold, jaw tight. "Question is, why did she know and we did?" He nodded at Whisper. She didn't flinch. "Because you weren't meant to know. Men like you are meant to fight. Men like me are meant to carry what the system can't admit." Barnes stared at her, chest heaving. "And you, where does that leave you?" For a moment the mask cracked, the calm faltered, and in her eyes he saw it, the loneliness, the decades of silence, the weight of every life taken so another might live. "It leaves me where I've always been," she said softly. "In between, too dangerous for the system, too human to disappear completely." The desert wind howled low, carrying the smell of smoke and cordite. The SEALs stood there, caught between victory and betrayal, staring at the crate that proved everything was broken. Whisper slung her rifle, gaze already scanning the horizon. "We don't have long. Recovery teams will come, and they won't be friendly." Barnes tightened his grip on his weapon. "So what now?" She looked at him, really looked, as though weighing not just a soldier but a man's soul. "Now you decide," she said quietly. "Do you follow the system that left you to die, or do you follow the truth no matter where it takes you?" No one spoke, no one breathed. Because they all knew the truth already. The real war wasn't against the fighters on the ridges. It was against the shadows inside their own flag. Why did victory feel like a death sentence? Barnes sat in the back of the Humvee, the stolen crate wedged between his boots. CIA markings stared up at him like an accusation. The desert rolled by outside the window, endless and indifferent. Inside, the silence was suffocating. "Finally broke it. We should blown it in place, left it burning." "Then we'd have no proof," countered, voice gravel thick. "Now at least we know who sold us out." "Yeah," snapped. "And what happens when we roll back into Falcon with this? Think they'll pat us on the back, pin medals on us, or bury us in the sand we just bled on?" No one answered, because the truth was already crawling up all their spines. The radio crackled, not Whisper's frequency this time, Falcon's, a sharp, clipped voice. "Viper 6, acknowledge, report status." Barnes reached for the handset, then froze. His gut twisted. Something in the tone, too rehearsed, too expectant. He glanced at Whisper. She shook her head slowly, almost imperceptibly. "Don't answer," she murmured. Why? Miller whispered back, eyes wide. Because they're not calling to bring you home, Whisper said, her voice steady. They're calling to pin your location. Almost on cue, the distant thump of rotors echoed across the desert night. Black dots moved against the moon. Helicopters. Cursed, slamming his fist against the dash. We're burned. Whisper leaned forward, her tone sharp. Cut east. Ditch the vehicle now. Didn't argue. He jerked the wheel, the Humvee bounding across rough sand. The rotors grew louder, spotlights sweeping. Barnes clutched the crate, every breath tight. They abandoned the Humvee in a shallow ravine, charges rigged to blow. The team grabbed what they could carry and followed Whisper into the darkness. Moments later, the Humvee erupted in fire, smoke trailing skyward like a flare. The helicopters circled the wreck, blind to the shadows already slipping away. They marched for hours until their legs ached and lungs burned. Finally, Whisper guided them into an old irrigation tunnel, concrete walls cracked, water long since dried. She lit a single lantern. The small circle of light made the space feel even smaller. Ripped off his helmet, packing. So that's it, we're fugitives now, from our own goddamn country. Miller sat hard against the wall, face pale. My wife, she'll think I went rogue, that I turned. Leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You knew this was coming, didn't you? He asked, Whisper. His voice wasn't accusation, it was resignation. She met his eyes without flinching. I warned you. Once you touch the shadows, the light won't have you back. Barnes stared at her, chest tight. You could told us. Her gaze softened, just barely. Would you have believed me? Or would you have run back to your colonel and begged for orders that would buried you? The words stung because they rang true. Silence thickened, broken only by the hum of the lantern. Finally, Barnes spoke, voice low. So what now? What the hell do we do? Whisper studied him for a long moment. Then she reached for her pack, pulled out a battered notebook. Maps, notes, names scrawled in careful hand. She slid it across to him. This is bigger than your squad, bigger than Falcon. The people who sold you out, they're not just protecting shipments. They're running a war inside the war. Weapons, intel, even bodies. You're not supposed to see it. That crate you're sitting on, it's a ledger. A record of everything they don't want the flag to see. Barnes flipped it open, his throat tightening as he skimmed. Names, locations, transactions, and one entry that froze him cold. His dead seal, listed like a line item, collateral. Barnes' hands shook, his vision blurred. Laughs, grins, lifeless eyes, all of it burned into his skull, reduced to a word, collateral. He slammed the book shut, breath ragged. Why show me this? Whisper's voice dropped softer. Because once you know, you can't unknow. You either walk back into their arms and pretend you never saw it, or you carry it with you until it kills you. The team shifted uneasily. None of them had signed up for this. They joined to fight enemies in front of them, not shadows behind their own. Muttered, this is bullshit. We're soldiers, not spies, not ghosts. Whisper's eyes cut to him hard. You think I wanted this? You think I asked to live in holes and eat dust while the system I bled for erased me? This isn't glory. This isn't medals. This is survival. And if you want to live, you'll stop clinging to the uniform and start clinging to each other. The words echoed in the narrow tunnel. For the first time, Barnes saw something fracture in his team. Angry but afraid, Miller lost in thoughts of home, steady but shaken, and himself torn between duty and truth. Whisper caught his eye again. You're their anchor, Barnes. If you break, they all break. Her voice softened, almost a whisper. Don't break. Hours later, when exhaustion finally dragged them to uneasy sleep, Barnes lay awake, staring at the cracked ceiling. The notebook rested beside him, heavy as any weapon. His name burned behind his eyelids. For the first time in his career, he wasn't afraid of dying. He was afraid of living long enough to choose the wrong side. Why did endings never feel like endings? Barnes felt it in his chest as they moved through the ruined outskirts of a weight that didn't belong to the gear on his back. The ledger from the CIA truck rode inside his pack, heavier than steel. Proof of betrayal. Proof his country had bartered his brother's lives like poker chips. Proof had been written off before his blood even touched the sand. Whisper walked point, her rifle low, every step measured. She didn't glance back, didn't ask if they were still following. She didn't need to. Shadows never doubted themselves. But the men behind her did. Muttered curses with every stride. Miller stumbled, exhaustion in his bones, fear in his eyes. Stayed silent, but his silence was different now, not calm, but hollow. Barnes saw it all and felt it claw inside him. He dragged them here, into the dark, into a war that wasn't theirs to fight. And tonight it would end, one way or another. They reached the just before dawn, a crumbling shell of concrete, its walls painted with old bullet holes. Whisper led them inside. The room smelled of dust and oil, old wood cracking under boots. She spread the maps across a table by shrapnel. "They'll come for us here," she said simply. "The men who set you up, CIA contractors, local proxies, maybe even your own." Spat on the floor. "Good, let them come." Whisper's gaze stayed on the map. "You say that now, but when the flag you swore to serve points its barrel at you, it feels different." No one argued. Barnes leaned against the wall, arms crossed tight. "So what's the play?" Whisper finally looked at him. Her eyes were sharp but not cold. "You have proof. That ledger could burn half the shadow games they're running, if you live long enough to put it in the right hands." Barnes shook his head. "And what's the right hands? The brass already knows. Hell, they're in on it." "That's why you don't hand it up," she said. "You hand it out, leak it, scatter it, make the truth too heavy to bury." The words hung like smoke. His jaw clenched. "You're talking treason." Whisper didn't flinch. "I'm talking survival, not just yours. It's every soldier they'll feed into the grinder next. You want his death to mean something. Then you stop letting them write names like his in the margins." The silence stretched. Then engines, outside, boots crunching gravel, voices barking in English, not Arabic, American. They were here. Miller's face drained of color. "It's us, our own. Jesus Christ, it's our own." Whisper grabbed her rifle, eyes hard. "Positions, no hesitation. If you want to live, you fight." The SEALs moved on instinct, but their movements were heavier, slower. Their enemies weren't insurgents anymore. They wore the same uniforms, the same patches, brothers turned hunters. The first breach shook the door from its hinges, rolled across the floor. Barnes roared orders, his voice breaking as he fired. 240 thundered, mowing down silhouettes in the doorway, picked his targets with cold precision. Miller clung to his radio like a lifeline, calling frequencies that no one would answer. And Whisper, she was everywhere. Shots precise, surgical, cutting down the contractors before their boots even cleared the threshold. Her calm never broke, her voice never wavered. But even ghosts can bleed. A round tore across her shoulder, spinning her back against the wall. Barnes saw the red spread across her sleeve, saw her teeth grit as she pushed forward anyway. "Stay down," he shouted, rushing to her side. Her eyes locked on his, fierce even through the pain. "Don't you dare waste this on me. Protect the ledger." The firefight raged. Bodies fell, dust choked the air. And in the chaos, Barnes realized the truth. They weren't here to capture them. They were here to erase them. No survivors, no story left behind. Unless... Barnes bellowed, "Get Miller out the back with the ledger, move." Cursed but obeyed, dragging Miller through the crumbling doorway. Covered them, cold fire in his eyes. Barnes stayed, Whisper stayed. The last stand. Rounds chewed through plaster. Barnes emptied his magazine, fury tearing his throat raw. Whisper's rifle sang beside him, each shot a punctuation mark against betrayal. Then silence. The dust hung heavy, smoke curled. and only two shapes remained standing. Barnes. Whisper. Bodies lay sprawled in the rubble, Black Ops contractors who would never be named, but the cost was carved deep, gone into the night, Miller clutching proof like a curse, buying them time with his life. Whisper leaned against the wall, blood soaking her sleeve, chest heaving. Barnes moved to steady her, but she waved him off. "I told you," she said softly, "shadows don't get carried." Her voice was different now, not steady, not stone, human, tired. Barnes swallowed hard. "Then come with us, live long enough to see them burn." She gave the faintest smile. It broke something in him. "That's your war now. Mine ended years ago." For the first time, he saw her not as a ghost, not as a legend, but as a woman who had carried too much too long. The distant sound of sirens echoed. More were coming, too many. Whisper pressed something into his hand, a spent casing, scratched with the same 4 letters. GRDG, Ghost Ridge. Her voice was barely a whisper. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And before he could argue, she turned back toward the doorway, rifle raised, facing the flood of shadows that poured toward them. Barnes hesitated only a second, then ran. He carried her words. He carried the ledger. And as the desert swallowed him, the sound of her final shots cracked through the dawn. Shots that bought him the chance to carry truth into the light. Whisper's legend did not die in that. It lived in the silence she left behind. And in the truth no one could bury anymore.